Wiktionary defines the Streisand effect as a phenomenon in which attempting to suppress an item of information attracts even more unwanted attention, thus furthering its dissemination. Coined in 2005 after a 2003 incident in which singer Barbra Streisand attempted to have a picture of her house removed from a public collection of 12,000 images documenting coastal erosion in California. It's a testament to how powerful the Streisand effect really is, because if the red pill hadn't have been banned from theaters or protested, I might have never found out about it. I'm not really on the internet much, so I had missed the Kickstarter and Milo supporting the film. It was only very recently that I had even found out about the documentary, so when it screened in my hometown, I was completely oblivious to its existence. I don't usually watch these types of documentaries, but I figured if it's being protested, it's gotta be worth a watch. I was not too familiar with men's rights prior to seeing the film. I saw it on Hulu. I've seen a few videos from Karen Strawn, and I remember all of the publicity that was generated from the Duke lacrosse scandal and the Rolling Stone A Rape on Campus scandal, but outside of that, I did not know a whole lot about the men's rights movement. I've always felt that either society or the regressive left, or as I personally like to refer to them as the progressive New World Order, I felt they believed that the have-nots were somehow entitled to take out their frustrations on the haves. Of course, what people perceive to be a have and a have-not, and what in reality is a have and a have-not, differs, as this documentary will demonstrate. So going in, I was already on the side of the MRAs. And I've always taken men's rights seriously. Until recently, I was unaware that there were people that don't take it seriously. So watching the red pill would not have resulted in me being red-pilled, as I already was. But even then, I was not prepared for what was in the documentary. I knew that men had it bad, but I did not realize that they had it this bad. Being viewed as expendable, higher suicide rates, living shorter lives, not being let into domestic violence shelters. To give a complete list would require me to deliver a transcript of the entire documentary. The one story that affected me the most was the story of one of the MRAs. He was tricked into fathering a son with his now ex-wife, and the child grows up to be obese because the mother is herself obese, and she wants the son to relate more to her than the father, even though being obese makes the son feel terrible. And later the father has to give up the fight for custody because it's starting to affect his health, and he hasn't seen his son since because of that. How could you not be changed by that story? I later found out that one of the MRAs featured in the documentary is from my hometown. It's a strange feeling to realize that as I was living my life, someone was going through hell not far from where I stood. The film is directed by Cassie Jaye, who at the start of the documentary describes herself as a feminist. In the film, she gives us a little bit of backstory in how she came to be a feminist. Before she became a director of documentaries, she was an actress, but she kept getting these rather questionable film roles, and married producers tried to sleep with her, and people told her to lose weight, which I don't understand because in the old footage she looked perfectly fine. I read a review of one of her films, and Mr. Reviewer referred to her several times as a bimbo, so I can totally understand, after all that, why she would become a feminist. At the start of the documentary, she decides to seek out men's rights activists after two highly publicized rape cases. She goes in mainly to document misogyny, but she ends up getting her views challenged. Throughout the film, there are these video diaries from her that apparently weren't intended to be included. They are fascinating because you can see her point of view and how it's slowly changing. I almost wanted more of it, but that could have potentially distracted from the men's rights activists. I suppose that's what interviews and the DVD special features are for. I don't know if the DVD has any special features, though. I thought she did a very good job with the film. I felt that she conducted her interviews well in how she allowed her interview subjects to tell their stories without interrogating them or anything like that. Despite mentioning the two rape cases in the beginning and that having been the inciting incident to get her to start the documentary, she doesn't really revisit the topic of rape except for these two short moments in the documentary. So I would have liked a little bit more information on that. We see footage from feminist protesters, and they are pretty much exactly what you would expect them to be. The constant swearing, the conniption fits, the nonsensical chants, they're all there. For example, what does "women hold up half the sky" mean? Another one was, "This is what men's rights looks like." And they are chanting this in the middle of a conniption fit. So all it does is make men's rights activists look peaceful. There was also racist, sexist, anti-gay, and I don't understand that at all. I understand why they would say sexist, but where exactly does racist and anti-gay come from? Cassie Jaye does interview some feminists in order to get their perspective on men's rights. The three that she interviewed, they seem like normal people. I find that their arguments sound more like casuistry to me, but casuistry, sophistry, never understood the difference. I think I'll just say casuistry. But as much as I do not agree with their arguments, it's always good to get someone else's perspective. Then we get to Miss Big Red. She just came across like a raving lunatic in her interview. I had heard of her, but I had never seen any footage of her on YouTube because I avoided it. I could barely understand anything she said in her interview. Does she honestly think that she is coming across well? Back to the three feminists that were interviewed. I felt like we didn't quite get enough of a rebuttal from them. I found a Q&A on YouTube where wherein one of the feminists actually featured in the film was present, so that's as close as any kind of rebuttal to some of the other stuff the MRAs brought up as we'll get, but unfortunately it was very hard to hear. The feminists, they mainly dealt with custody issues and domestic violence, but the MRAs brought up a lot more than that. For example, Karen Straughn's example of Boko Haram. What would be the feminists' explanation for that? The next thing I will talk about is only tangentially related to the documentary, but I've seen it happen once before and it drove me mad. I'm probably going to rant on it eventually, so I may as well just kill two birds with one stone. I had come across two negative reviews for the film. Sir and Madam reviewers called Cassie Jaye a propagandist and accused the film of being unfairly biased in favor of the MRAs. Whilst it would be presumptuous for me to say that this is an absolute, I do wonder if Sir and Madam reviewers would say the same if the film had favored feminism instead. That's not what drove me mad, however. What the reviewers fail to understand, either due to poor education or through willful misrepresentation, is that documentaries are the sincerest form of propaganda. So calling a documentarian a propagandist is not legitimate film criticism. To quote a lecture from one of my former film professors, when have you ever seen a documentary say, kill the rhinos? Survival of the fittest. Look at all the animals that have gone the way of the Javanese tiger or the thylacine. People are starving to death out there. Why should we spend all that money to save the rhinos when it could go to ending world hunger? Kill the rhinos. When you write an argumentative paper, you add a paragraph of the opposition's argument, and Cassie Jaye did that here. When judging an argumentative paper, you don't criticize it for being slanted. Same with a trial. You don't say, objection, defense's argument is slanted in favor of the defense. I do not like it when film critics write reviews which further illiteracy in film and media studies. But back to the red pill. There are some flaws in the documentary. The opening credits are very cluttered. Having all those articles like that, where it's almost like a collage, it draws your vision like a magnet. The first time I saw the film, I did not even realize that there were credits in the opening sequence. At least one of the video diaries does not seem to be white balanced, which makes sense as they weren't supposed to be included. I don't know what the film was edited on, but I believe you can white balance in post on Final Cut. I've never tried it before, so I don't know how good it looks. For all I know, they might have already white balanced the clip in post, and this is just as good as it'll look. The CG, the character generations are a little hard to read, especially when it's in red whenever a men's rights activist appears. Karen Straughn's interview is conducted in a rather noisy environment. I do wonder why they chose to interview her there in the first place, but I would have recommended doubling up or tripling up on the audio, record from the camera mic, a boom, and a law of a body mic. But outside of that, The Red Pill is a great documentary. It was very informative, and I really recommend it. I would have liked a little bit more info towards the end. Cassie Jaye mentions MGTOW and the red pill on Reddit, but she doesn't really go into either of them, so unless you were already familiar with the two, you're not going to learn a whole lot about them. This isn't too unusual for a documentary, however. They've always had less detail than books on the same subject. And hey, if the documentary gets other people to search out information and do their own research, then it's done its job. As strange as it is, I feel like I owe some thanks to all those angry protesters, for if it wasn't for them, I might have skipped this documentary.